Hi, I'm Jared Lintner, Tackle Warehouse Pro, and today what I want to talk about is something I'm very excited about. It's a new rod made by Powell. Being out on the tour, one thing I kind of added to my game after seeing a lot of different guys catching them on is a square bill crankbait, and I'm talking like a BDS4, a Jackall MR60, and the whole thing about it is you got to have the right rod to throw these baits. And Keith Bryant, owner of Powell, is a really good friend of mine, and we got together and we made several samples of rods, and we finally got it right. This rod right here is a 695 extra fast square bill crankbait rod, and the unique thing about it, I should say the main thing I wanted out of this rod was a real soft tip, but at the same time a real sturdy backbone. And the reason you want that is because on these baits you're usually throwing around wood, grass, brush, any kind of object that's in the water. You are throwing this crankbait right into it like you would a jig or a spinnerbait. So in doing that, when a fish eats it around that heavy cover, you got to have the backbone to pull that fish away from the structure. And it's not like a normal crankbait situation where you want a long fiberglass rod to really fight the fish and take care of those treble hooks so they don't spit them. This rod right here is 6'9", 5 power, and 6'9" allows you to make really tight, accurate casts while still maintaining the backbone that you need. Part of the reason you need a strong backbone is because of these treble hooks. On most square bill crankbaits, Lucky Craft, Jackall, even some of the speed traps, you have really thick hooks compared to a lot of the deeper diving, I would say structure fishing crankbaits. They're more of a thin wire hook, and you don't really need a lot of backbone to set the hook and fight the fish. As you can see, like I was saying, these are really thick hooks. You need a lot of leverage to move that bait and penetrate the fish's mouth with these hooks. One of the things that I've noticed a lot is high gear ratio on these, especially in the summertime. Post spawn gets a lot of bites, and if you have too soft of a rod, it's going to take all the absorption. It's going to absorb all the action of that crankbait and basically make the rod non-existent. So when you're cranking this, you can see the rod tip really working for you. You can keep track of what that bait's doing, what it's deflecting off of, if you get a bite. And then when you go to set the hook, it loads up in the upper third of the rod. And what I mean when I say that is, you can see right here, most crankbait rods, they're going to absorb down to here. The parabolic bend is going to come all the way down almost to the first guide. This one is in the upper third of the rod, which creates a lot of force, a lot of backbone, and you're going to land more fish. I've had the privilege of kind of doing the field testing with this, and I can tell you right now, this rod actually makes square bill fishing easier, and it puts pretty much every bite that I've had on a square bill crankbait. I was just at Clear Lake, catch them all. I mean, it's the right rod for this specific technique. Again, it's not a deep diving crankbait rod by any means. It's pretty much for square bills, so if you're fishing around brush, docks, heavy brush, grass, any kind of situation where you're throwing that square bill into heavy cover, this is the rod you need. And again, it's exclusively at Tackle Warehouse. There's only 100 rods made, so you got to get them while you can. It'll be up on the side here shortly, so check it out, and it'll put more fish in the boat for you. One of the things I'm really a stickler about is throwing lipless crankbaits and having the right rod. Keith over there at Powell Rods makes a great lipless crankbait rod in a 754. The thing that I wanted was a rod that you can throw bigger traps on, as well as a walking type bait like a spook or a bow stick. And took a long time, but we developed the right rod, and this here is the 705 CB glass rod. It's labeled special exclusive Tackle Warehouse ST rod, which is a spook trap rod. And the thing that I like about this rod is it's 7 foot, first of all, and it has a real forgiving tip, but a lot of backbone. So when you're throwing like a 3/4 ounce or a 1 ounce rattle trap around heavy vegetation and you want to rip that bait out, it doesn't absorb all the grass into the rod. It'll snap it out of that grass really fast. As well as when you're throwing a Zara spook or a bow stick or any type of walking bait, you can make exceptionally long casts and still hook the fish and fight them to the boat without losing them. You know, a lot of times when you're throwing a lot baits with treble hooks on them, you'll lose fish because you either have too stiff of a rod or too light of a rod. And this rod right here has eliminated pretty much all fish loss. You know, the main thing when you're throwing a lipless crankbait around vegetation is you really got to feel what's going on with your bait, because you know, as it gets closer into fall, winter time, a lot of times those fish will just suck the bait in without, you know, really popping it. And you need to know the difference between grass or a subtle bite. And this rod right here lets you feel exactly what your rattle trap is doing down there. And you know, I've had the pleasure of field testing this up at Clear Lake in the California Delta, and I'm telling you firsthand, this is a bad rod right here. You know, the next bait I really want to emphasize, what is the purpose of this rod is for a spook. The whole thing with throwing a spook or a walking type bait, pretty much any brand you want to throw, you know, these plugs right here, like this bow stick or a super spook or even a big Sammy, you know, you can't throw your regular pop R rod or a smaller type walking bait rod, just because you're not going to be able to make accurate casts with that big old bait, and plus you're not going to be able to fight the fish correctly or hook them for that matter. So with this rod right here, you can make accurate casts around, like, you know, whatever you're fishing, tules, grass, docks, and with this tip, it's soft enough when you hook a fish not to lose the fish, you know, on the retrieve, but it's still stiff enough at the same time to make that bait walk like it needs to. You know, generally when I'm throwing a topwater spook or bow stick, I'm throwing heavy line, like 20-pound monofilament or even 30 to 60-pound spider wire. And you know, we designed this rod to throw these bigger walking type baits, and so far it's been nothing but, I mean, great success with it. Again, you know, they're available at Tackle Warehouse. Limited amount of rods available, so get them while you can, and this fall you'll definitely catch more fish with this rod, and it'll prove to be one of your favorites.